Hi, everyone. This is Pam Reese with Adventures in Aging, and I'm here with Gary Vandenberg.
Hey, Pam. It's great to be back.
Yeah, it is. And also, it's great to have our listeners.
We love them.
Gosh, I can't thank everyone enough for listening and commenting on our podcast. We are so appreciative. Please keep it coming. Share our podcasts if you like them.
Subscribe, give us reviews, whatever it might be. Just keep us rolling here.
Yeah, we're reading them, and we love them. So thank you so much. Today, we're going to talk about sandwiches.
I love sandwiches.
I know.
I growing up, I wish my career would have been making grilled cheese sandwiches. I'm convinced that was my calling in life.
So,
but
Gary,
I also like peanut butter sandwiches. I have turkey sandwiches, ham sandwiches. I like all kinds of sandwiches.
But the sandwiches we're talking about today are the generational sandwiches.
The sandwich generation. Well, those are more like Sloppy Joes or the old Dagwoods from the Blondie movies that no one probably ever even knows what I'm talking about.
They were giant sandwiches.
Just think of a giant sandwich you couldn't get your mouth over.
Exactly. And so the sandwich generation is about living communally with your family.
And also caring about people that, you care about.
Right.
They may not be physically in your house, but the ones that you're, reaching out to every day.
They still take moments of your time every single day to check on them.
Absolutely.
So there was a research study done in July 2020, so not even a year ago. And get this, over 50% of 18 to 29-year-olds are still living with their parents.
50%?
Over, yes.
Over 50%?
Yes.
Oh, my gosh.
Do you fall into that category, Gary?
Well, as a matter of fact, I've got 2 of my 3 kids that are in their mid-20s right in my house, yes. And, I think in some ways it's a positive thing. One of them does the yard work. He's a handyman, works on my car. He can stay forever, right? The other
because he's your personal servant.
He's my servant. Yeah, he's a good one to have around. The other one, I think he's trying to pay off a huge student loan. I know He's trying to pay off the student loan, and really is just biding time till he pays off the student loan. But it can be joyful at times. It can be stressful at times, and hopefully we can talk about some of those things that come up when they do. That statistic, though, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's the highest it's been since the Great Depression, isn't it? Something of that nature.
It is,
and that's just incredible. And times have changed, and I often think, well, why is that happening? Probably financially, I would think, is partly part of it, but socially too. You and I have been in healthcare for many, many years, and in the last year, we've experienced families coming in, and I guess you call them yanking them out of these places.
Their loved ones out of the nursing home and took them home.
That rather try to deal with it at home, and you think about do they really know what they're getting into? I guess in some regards, but the idea is that we do live in those sandwich generation. I always wondered why we didn't call it bookend generation.
The bookends.
Or some other term that was related to something else rather than sandwich.
I know. It's also affectionately called in the middle, living in the middle. Yeah. And that involves 30-something-year-olds. They have small children. Then they have a mom or a dad living with them as well. And then it stays that way until they're in their 50s, and now those little kids that were there when Grandma and Grandpa were there, Grandma and Grandpa might still be there, God willing, but now those kids are coming back home.
Yeah, they're coming back home. And I know there's different definitions. There's definitions of what a family is anymore when you stop and think about the family isn't always people related to each other. It's not always people married. There's different aspects of that. And there's also different things regarding the sandwich generation, that there's people that are called a club sandwich, and they're dealing with almost 3 generations.
Okay, the club. Are there names to these?
Oh, there's club, and then there's something called an open-faced sandwich, and that's really just somebody dealing with an elderly relative or friend that they might have. But when you stop and think about the last 2020 was a big year regarding the pandemic and how it brought people in situations maybe they didn't choose to live in, but just the idea of being closer together. Again, there's positive and negatives, and we're going to touch a little bit about that on our program today. When you stop and think about growing up, Pam and I are kind of in a similar age range here as baby boomers, and I think 2 songs that come to mind was Alice Cooper, I'm 18, right?
I'm 18.
And I got to get out.
And I got to get out. I got to get out of this place.
Yeah. And, there's another song, too. I got to get out of this place by, I think it's the Animals or someone like that.
Oh, I remember it.
But really, when we were growing up, there was milestones. When you're 16, you get a driver's license. When you're 18, you graduate from high school, and you get the heck out of your. It's a one-way ticket.
It was a given.
Yeah.
You graduate from high school, you move on to college, and you never go back.
Yeah, and I was kidding. I was thinking about this earlier today. I remember this kind of friend of mine. He lived in a garage, believe it or not. It's the middle of winter, going over to visit him. He opens the garage door. He's living in there with a couch and a couple lamps and stuff going, what is this going on?
He was on his own.
Any way to get out. I don't think it was his house. Any way to get out of his house. And wasn't it the truth? I mean, you could come back from wherever you're at, the vacation, or come back for food or whatever it might be from your parents. But the idea of living at your folks' house was inconceivable.
It was not even an option, nor was it a desire, right?
Oh.
Even though, Gary, I loved going back home in the summers from college. And I loved my life going back to my mom and dad's house. My brothers and I always talk about as soon as you walk in mom and dad's house, you have that smell. You know that smell that you get in a grandparent's house?
I wonder what my house smells like after COVID. After thinking about that the last year.
No, this is a pleasant smell, not a...
not a year-long COVID smell type
No, I can't even describe the smell.
Okay.
But it's the most comforting smell.
Oh, yeah.
And the atmosphere is so comfortable and soothing. My brothers and I talk about we could have the most energetic day. We could be all, ready to work, physical activity. We walk into our parents' house. All you want to do is lay down.
Oh, yeah. The couch.
We were comfortable. Yeah.
Well, that's what the goal really is in life, is to be comforting. Yeah, the idea, even the phrase boomerang children, boomerang kids, I don't think that even existed. To think that people, if somebody went out and they ended up back with their parents again, you were like, what happened?
Well, it was embarrassing.
And it was just
right.
Kind
you didn't talk about it.
Yeah, I don't think you talked about it, and I think they tried everything. At least my small group of friends, they would do anything they could. And part of that I think is just that definition of what a nuclear family. When I was growing up, I think I first recall it. I was thinking about this. I think I was probably like in 12 years old or something. I heard I'm in a nuclear family. That means I have
a nuclear bomb,
mom and dad, and brothers and sisters or whatever. And I actually looked it up here for this program, and the nuclear family actually has nothing to do with nuclear age or anything like that, because it came up in 1924. If you look up the Oxford English Dictionary, whatever it might be, and what nuclear had to do with more is a Latin word, nucleus, meaning nut or the core, and how in society it was defined that way. The idea was at that point that. And this is nothing new. It had happened over time, but hundreds of years. But the idea was it was defined finally that that's the family unit. And again, like I said, the families have changed. The whole family unit now has kind of changed to something else. About 20 years ago, I lived near Boston, and what was quite interesting was we had several neighbors. They got married. Their kids got married.
Yeah.
But instead of moving away with their new bride or new husband, they moved into the neighbor's house.
Oh, yeah.
This was commonplace. This was the culture in my neighborhood up there, not the stereotype against anything about Massachusetts. But they did not go out and buy a house or move into apartments. They moved in with the relatives there.
It was a given.
And I always thought that was kind of a cool thing. Again, things change over time. And, I often say to my kids, I'm thinking I would drive my parents nuts if I was their age, or, vice versa. It would be a challenging time to try to tolerate,
I can honestly say that my mom and dad probably would have loved me and my brothers living with them.
Oh, yeah? Why is that?
Just because they had that, they loved that family atmosphere. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, dinners at my house growing up were like your Leave It to Beaver dinners. Everybody sat down together. Mom made the meat, the potatoes, the salad, and then I'm trying to think of her favorite dessert, which was the fruit cocktail in Jell-O. Did you ever have that? Did you ever have that?
No.
Well, we did every day.
Fruit cocktail and Jell-O?
Yeah.
I think we did have that. Yeah,
No,
it was kind of a mystery how that floats around in there.
What is that in there? But Mom would serve that, and then she would think that it was special if you put a little dollop of whipped cream
I've got
on
whipped
top
cream,
of
yeah.
it. Anyway, our dinners were like that every single day. All of us sat down together, and I'm not kidding you. It was kind of like going around the table, what you did today. So I had that quintessential kind of family environment where everyone enjoyed everybody's company.
Oh, yeah.
And so when me and my brothers were gone, I think my mom and dad just didn't know what to talk about anymore.
There's good and bad parts to that. I know we had 5 children and both my parents, and we had this big table. I think we still have it, in fact. And, family-style dinner. It would come around, and I still to this day, I eat one thing at a time because it would come by, and you'd eat as fast as you could as that mashed potatoes come by, and the next thing would come by.
Yeah.
And there was always this massive guilt trip at the end that people, unfortunately, are starving somewhere in the world. So
yeah.
I need to lick my plate clean, basically, just
Yeah.
to make them feel better. I still to this day don't know how that helped the starving people in other parts of the world.
Well, we never did, but we thought it meant something.
But, that was the family unit. But by golly, when you turned 18, you probably either went to college or you got a job, and you got the heck out of Dodge there.
No, you did, and you never went back. And I never went back. Did you ever go back to your parents' house?
It was for a very short period of time until I could find some way out of there. That's for sure. But
so it wasn't because you wanted to.
I don't know. I think there has to do with freedoms and time and I'll never forget. My father was notorious. I remember calling one time, and he had a curfew, and I think it was like a midnight or something like that. And I was playing cards or having fun at my friend's house, and I call, hey, I'm going to be a little late, right?
Yeah.
And he goes, well, where are you? And I described where I was. He says, you're like 17 minutes away. The clock starts now.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things.
And you went home.
Oh, yeah.
There was no arguing.
Full blast. So, I guess it's good to have parameters in one's life, but it's also the idea that I sure like to hang out and have my own freedom and come and go as I please.
So I can relate totally to that. In that when I was in college and I'd go back home for the weekends or for the summer, back then it was the discos, right? And so
maybe for you as the discos, but
no, it was for me.
Yeah,
it wasn't
they were
for
there.
you.
Oh, I went to a disco and realized it was I was not John Travolta right away.
Okay,
so I tried my best staying alive. But
and you died.
I died on stage, yeah.
So it was a given. I'd come home on Fridays. Me and my friends would all meet up because we were all home from college, and we went to the Big Apple. We went to the disco Friday and Saturday night. Of course, it's open till 2:00 in the morning. You're there until 2:00 in the morning. Then, lo and behold, you might have to stop and get a donut on the way home. But I was required that before midnight to call my dad.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And, of course, you had to go stand in line at the payphone because everyone else in that line was calling home as well.
And there was no cell phones.
No. So I'd call home, and my dad always had that same mundane voice. Yes. Where are you? Well, you knew where I was, right? I'm at the disco. And I'd say, Dad, we're going to stop and have breakfast. All right. You better be careful, right? And so, of course, that's what we did. We had a blast. Everybody'd leave the disco, go have breakfast. I would pull into my house. It had to be 3:00 in the morning, right? Disco closes at 2:00. My house is completely dark. And I don't know if you remember that old Carly Simon song. And I cannot remember the name of it, but it's about my father sits at night with no lights on. His cigarette glows in the dark. That song was written for my dad because my house was totally pitch black, but I'd see the glow of his cigarette in the window.
For those younger listeners, that was commonplace. Most parents either had, if you ever look at photos, they usually had a drink in one hand and a cigarette in another.
And I would still sneak into the house. I know that's him. He's always waiting up for me. Gary, I'm 20 years old. I'm 21 years old. And I'd come in through the kitchen to the living room. My dad would stand up, pitch black. He's there, and he'd say, well, it's time to go to bed.
It's time to go to bed.
He'd go off to his room, and I'd go off to mine.
Oh.
But, and I just really couldn't imagine that was the way life was going to be for the rest of my life every single night if I lived at home. But certainly tolerated it on my home visits.
It's unbelievable. So when we think about the whole sandwich generation, and I've got friends and I've got relatives too that dealing with different age groups and family different family situations. But it's surprising, and I was looking up some of the numbers here again, but almost half of the people in their 40s and 50s are actually both raising younger children and also dealing with a parent, that's over 65. Does that surprise you at all, or is that
not at all? Because I actually kind of lived that for a while.
You can relate that.
Yes.
And well, tell me a little bit about, you've got a personal situation. I know I wanted to pull that in with your mother and your daughter and how that all worked. What was it?
Yeah. So my daughter at the time was 30, in her 32 maybe, had two small daughters, a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old. I live in Columbus. My daughter lives 2.5 hours away from me, as well as all my other family. My mother lived 2.5 hours away, my brothers, my son. And so I was the outlier. I was the one the furthest away. And when my mom started to have Alzheimer's and it was starting to affect her in a way that she could not live on her own any longer, my daughter, who is also a nurse, but also was just loved my mom, right? She was my mother's good friend. They hung out together. And so my daughter insisted that Grandma come live with her.
Okay. Yeah.
And so my brothers and I talked about it, and of course, they were very apprehensive in that, how do we burden this young mom and her husband and these two children with Grandma? How do we...
Because I don't think anyone plans to be the sandwich, do they?
You don't say. I can't wait to take care of my mom.
Can't wait. Can't 3 more years, and then I get to take care of mom or
I
grandma.
can't wait to go live with my daughter.
I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, that doesn't happen, does it?
It doesn't happen. And so now you're faced with all these decisions you hear others talk about because you don't really think it's going to affect you, and then it does. So long story short, an apartment was made. We made an apartment for my mom, actually, in my daughter's basement.
That's pretty cool.
And I had, this was actually just 3 years ago. So I had just retired from my partnership, and the goal was that I was going to help Kylie, my daughter, take care of my mom at her house. So poor Kylie, right? Young mom,
you have
husband.
Two grandchildren, is 2 granddaughters?
Yeah, I have 2 granddaughters. She has the 2 little ones. So my mom moves in. Then her mom, Kylie's me, I'm going to come stay with you a lot. Okay. That poor kid had everybody there.
All generations. Yeah, she was the sandwich.
She was the sandwich. And so we were all together. And the worst part about it, Gary, and the thing with caregivers is, I talked about it before, that caring for others is natural. It's innate. It's instinctively to me as a nurse. And I want to be the best, and I want the best for them. But when it comes to taking care of my mom, I used to tell my mom years ago, Mom, I'm not giving you a shower. I'm not taking you to the bathroom and she would laugh and she'd go, well, I don't want you to. Okay. You're never going to have to do that with me. Yeah. Then comes the day, right? Thank you, God, for my daughter who steps in and says, I'm going to do it. Mm-hmm. And so for a long time, probably for 1.5 years, this is what happened. Mom was there. I was there. The little kids were there. But I'll tell you, if my daughter were to talk to you, and someday maybe we'll have her on and talk about being young, having children, and people, Yeah.
People and your mom had Alzheimer's?
She had Alzheimer's. And I'm here trying to figure out how to cure her, and Kylie's trying to figure out how to get her safely to the bathroom. Right. Yep. And it creates so many alternative feelings and thoughts in so many different ways. And that, what do you make for dinner? Do you make the same thing for everybody? What about bedtime? What about who's getting up in the middle of the night? Then we're buying alarms to put by my mom's bed. So if she tries to get up, it's alerting us. And we hear that. Now, who's getting up? Me, Kylie? Of course it's Kylie. Right? Kylie's getting up. But all of us living in that same household together, and God bless her husband. God bless John, her husband. He's dealing with all these in-laws. Could you imagine?
Well, these are stressors, right?
They're stressors.
Things out of your control.
Out of your control. But this guy is dealing with it, and he is accepting of it. And I think that was a big part of this is finding your acceptance of it and finding the value in doing it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm sure, in hindsight, too, you've shared with me that, or she shared with me one time about how she was so glad that her children got to experience their grandmother.
So my little granddaughters learned early on, about caring. And I can see that in them today. And the cutest things, and we have pictures of it, would be that my granddaughter Harper, who at the time was, 4 or 5, she would take her stethoscope, her mom's stethoscope, real stethoscope, and she would say, I'm going to go to check Gigi, is what they affectionately called my mom. And we have pictures of her with her stethoscope with a serious little face trying to listen for my mom's heartbeat. And I'll tell you what, my mom absolutely loved it. And having Alzheimer's, that connection between the elderly and a child is fabulous because they're both pure at heart. And so my mom would get the biggest kick out of it, and my granddaughter as well. And so there were a lot of positives that came out of it. But also, was it stressful? 100% stressful.
It seems like it's a 24-hour a day. Was it a 24-hour a day kind of a situation? Because I can't imagine leaving her alone or anything like that.
It reached a point where, no, you couldn't take a ride. My daughter could not take a ride to the grocery store for 2 hours because mom might try to get out of her chair, right?
Yeah.
And even though we bought monitors, we bought cameras, it was all there. And if there's no one home, I could literally get on my phone and say, hey, mom, here's my voice. Now she's trying to get up to go find me.
She's looking around for you?
She's looking around. And I'm going, Mom, sit down. Hey, trying to get back home, right?
Do you remember Mr. Microphone? Do you remember that at all?
Oh, yes.
And when my daughter was probably like a year old, and I put it in a Christmas packet, whatever that Mr. Microphone, the speaker was. And so then I'm over in the corner saying, come open the package. Because, that freaked out everybody, including me. The packages were talking. But I imagine that your mom was probably going, where's this voice
coming from?
Okay.
And so you're out and about and you're trying to get away for just maybe 30 minutes. And it's, oh gosh, I got to get right back home. But the result of it is this. We would not have had it any other way. Right? My daughter would not have had it any other way. I would not have had it any other way. My brothers would not have. But it is an adjustment and a change in life. Everybody needs their space, right?
I was saying, how did you keep from being burned out? Isn't that the most common thing that happens?
Yeah, burnout. Caregiver burnout is a real thing. I think burnout by being with people all the time also creates a burnout. That's why everyone needs their space. That's why there's things like man caves and she sheds, all that stuff, right? Everybody,
or a car just driving away from your house. I'm good at that one.
Oh, Gary is And in fact, whoever's listening to this podcast, you're probably just trying to get away, and you're out driving for 30 minutes in your car.
You're either with a relative listening, as we said earlier, or you're driving away trying to get from
Or there's
them.
a 20-year-old hanging over your shoulder, and I just need to get out for a minute. Yeah, so true.
Yeah. Well, what is so you were saying, what, I guess, how would you suggest, or suggestions you have for someone that would find themselves in a spot where maybe they're bringing in an elderly relative into their home or in a closer environment? What suggestions do you have that they would, should be thinking about, be thinking about now before they actually make that
No.
move?
So go back to what you said. Nobody is thinking, hey, I can't wait to take care of mom and dad one day in my home, or I can't wait to call them every single day and worry about them if they don't answer. But the preparation for that is space. Right. And I do know people today that are creating spaces. If this should happen, if mom or dad have to come live with me, if my children have to come live with me, this is where it's going to be. And having it be the bedroom across from yours probably isn't the best thing, right? Where you're all sharing the same bathroom. So if it's possible to make some structural changes and think ahead to what if that is a possibility one day.
Yeah.
Have a structural change in life to just make it livable.
But don't you find yourself you're on their schedule? They're not they're not on your schedule, are they? You became on your mom's schedule.
You become that person's schedule. When you're a caregiver at home, you're living and breathing by them. You're eating when they eat. Everything is according to them. And I think the biggest thing for those people is support. And maybe that support is outside of the home. It's outside of your relatives, maybe outside of your close group. And maybe sometimes an objective person that you could talk to would be fabulous. And Gary, I've said it a million times. My career was senior housing, senior care, senior health. Right. And never wanted my mom to be in one. Always knew about marketing, always knew about how we would bring people into our facilities. Didn't want that from my mom, but I can't tell you how many times, even with my knowledge, my resources, and my collaborations throughout my career, I would have loved to hear a knock at my door, go open the door, and see someone that says, "Hey, Pam, I know a lot about caregiving. Do you want me to help you today? Do you want me to talk?" I would have said, "Come in and sit down." No. It is kind of like when my children were little and I'd take them to the pediatrician and I wouldn't tell the pediatrician I was a nurse because I would ask all the really crazy, stupid questions. It's the same. Yeah.
Well, and as we're aging, I know when we were having our children, those books out there, What to Expect When You're Expecting and those types of things.
Yeah.
And I don't know when it comes to older relatives, if there's that big source book out there of saying here's 50 books that deal with that. There's probably not. It's probably limited when it comes to what caregivers do have for supporting.
Well, there's a million books. There's a lot of hotlines. There's a lot of resources out there. But when it comes right down to it, do they really meet your needs? I don't know. None really met my needs. Mm-hmm. And I think that having a person to talk to, a person to say, "Let me help you with this," is very, very important. And so I'm going to say, if you are caregiving to a loved one at home, look for your resources in your community. Look for support groups. Honestly, nobody wants to go belong to a support group, right? "Hi, my name is Pam, and I'm a caregiver at home." And where's that take you? At the end of the day, you're going to feel really connected to other people like you.
Right, to reach out to others
and
in similar
to hear
situations.
Those other stories.
Almost like a support network type of
support
thing.
Networking is
It always
crucial.
seems to me there's got to be a balance between, I hate the words burden and guilt or something.
Sure.
It seems that most children don't say you're a burden to their parents, right? Most parents may say, "I'm a burden. I don't want to be a burden to you," the child.
That's correct. Yeah.
But then on the other hand, you've got this whole thing about guilt of saying, maybe I need to be here instead of doing what I need to do for me. Is there
that
a degree?
is the number one problem. And so many people that are caring for loved ones at home, they carry around so much guilt, right? Because they're still working. They might even still have children at home they're raising. Or they might be into that empty nest thing where they really thought this was the time in life that they could travel and enjoy the company of their spouse and live the life they wanted to live. And now all of a sudden they can't. And so, you've got to always find time for yourself. Always.
Yeah. And how do you do that? You just kind of schedule it and say, I'm going to be out.
Well,
this
is where you reach out to people at times that you never did before.
Oh, by the way.
Like you call someone that you would never call, but is an acquaintance. "Hey, I need some help." No, seriously. This is where you pull in your network of friends and you pull in your network of community resources and you look for that help to escape.
Now, if somebody's a little bit more alert, I've got a good friend and his father moved in who's in his 90s. And, I can see stress going on because my friend's wife is taking care of some grandchildren every day, too. So they're dealing with both ends of this, is there something about if somebody's a little bit more alert, like this gentleman is, of determining some lines of responsibility or lines and, here's when we eat, here's when we don't eat. It just seems like at times that could be.
Would you put up like a schedule?
I don't know. I'm just saying I know that one thing that comes to mind is this gentleman wants to read a printed newspaper every day.
Aw.
And there's been times the newspaper hasn't arrived. Well, it becomes,
Does he get upset?
Well, he's looking for his newspaper. Right?
Sure.
And then, when we're going to eat, might be something like that. So, schedules of times of doing different things, and you're trying to do the dance without
because you're trying to meet someone else's needs that are outside of your own needs, right? So something sacrificing, and that your own needs are sacrificing. And so the way to get those needs back is to solicit that hope and support so that you can go and have your needs met. And I know it sounds easier said than done. People used to say it to me, but I promise you, the more you look for that intermittent support, the more you will find it.
That's great. When you're talking about your mother and your daughter and the whole experience there, in the long run, there's probably more benefits than pain or cost. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. So, Gary, I was one of those people that said, I promise you I'll never put you in a nursing home. And I can tell you, my mom, you know how a lot of parents go, oh, I don't want to be a burden to you. Yeah. You know how I don't want you to have to take care of me. You know what my mom would say?
What's that?
I hope you never put me in a nursing home. And I hope that it's you that's taking care of me.
See, and for those new listeners, I've been in nursing homes for 40 years. I think it's something, when I was about 8 years old, I go, hey, that looks like a pretty cool place to live. They give you 3 meals a day. Yeah. You got people taking care of you, activities.
Gosh.
There's always holidays or always something. It seems every day. It's 7 days a week. I'm one of those few people that goes, hey, if time comes up, I'm ready to sign up.
Put me in, please.
Put me in sooner than later.
Oh, you're killing me.
Yeah.
Because you have your own space.
Anymore post-COVID, you got your own space.
You do have I do got to tell all our viewers that if you would choose to go to AL or a nursing home today, you kind of have your own space.
Your own space, at least for a little while here.
Yeah.
But when you really think about it with, the challenges of being in that sandwich generation, again, it's the different age groups. And, I was thinking just about, how do they see it? How do you think if your mom had been more, if she hadn't had dementia, how would she have seen that? Or
she would have felt horrible.
Really?
Yes,
she had to,
100%. She would have been humiliated, embarrassed. It would have broke her heart to know where she was when she was there.
Oh, see, and I don't know. It's one of those things. I was thinking when we were preparing for this, a good friend of mine in high school, his grandmother lived with him. They're a little bit of an extended family.
Sure.
And his parents went out of town, right? Well, when your parents go out of town, you're in high school. Guess what you do? You have a party, right? You invite everybody over.
Who doesn't?
And when Grammy came down, she was actually the life of the party. I'll never forget that. I was thinking about that yesterday. I go, she was actually probably, I hope we swore her to secrecy after that party,
sure.
But the idea was she came down and had a great time with all of us. So
I got to tell you, my mom and dad watched my kids.
Yep.
And then after my dad passed away, it was my mom. My mom lived alone for almost 30 years after my dad passed away. Mm-hmm. And so when my kids were older, they're seniors in high school or home for the summer from college, and my mom would stop over, and if the kids had friends over, I'm not kidding you, Gary, my mom loved it.
I think they can relate sometimes.
Yeah, no, she loved being around them. She laughed.
Oh, gosh. So in retrospect here, again, we're in a time because of lots of different reasons. People are living together, right? They're living together with younger folks. Again, I ask my kids sometimes what they think about living with their parents. And again,
what do they think?
Well, like I said, the one, it's temporary. It's a time clock. He knows he's getting out. The other one, he's happy.
He's comfortable.
And you stop and think
but
sometimes.
But you're friends, right?
Yeah, you kind of move into that different relationship.
You do.
I can't control what he's doing, and I don't want to control what he's doing.
No, I can tell that in my relationships with my children, we're friends. We're friends. I still have the mom worry, believe me, right?
Yeah. I'd say our bigger challenge are things like remote controls, TVs for, what channels we're watching.
Yeah, only the important things.
And he went out and bought himself a really nice lazy boy, and he put it right in the middle of the living room. So he established his point in our house that's
and you're okay.
It's his throne, if that makes sense. So,
sure.
And I don't get near that chair, but it's the idea that I think it's interesting to look at it from different points of view. Again, if you're a younger person and you find yourself in this spot, maybe it's temporary, but enjoy, learn from your elders, right?
Yeah.
And they're not here forever. I appreciate the time that you have, but also learn how to dance, I guess, if that makes sense.
I love that. All right. Well, we're nearing the end. Gary, it's always a pleasure.
Time goes fast when you're having fun.
Right?
Right.
So I want to thank all of our viewers. Please share, review, subscribe. We appreciate all of you. And we'll talk to you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.